before I ask you to share, let me say one or two things. I remember when I was 19 years old, and at the age of 17, my my dad worked for a multinational also, and one day he received a bullet in the mail. And you must remember, in Malaysia, we don't have web guns like you guys have hanging everywhere. Well, maybe not hanging everywhere, but I exaggerate. But you guys have sheep and no, not sheep. What's that? Kudu and springbok hanging everywhere, but not the guns. Uh, so in Malaysia, if you own a weapon, a gun, without a license, it's death by mandatory death by hanging. Okay. Likewise, if you have heroin, morphine, anything above, depending on the type of drug, 3 grams, death by hanging. Okay. So they hang people with drugs and guns. Even a bullet could be a long time in jail. So this is the enormity of the situation. So my dad was mailed a bullet in the mail because these stupid gangsters thought that he owned this multinational, right? Not very educated and smart gangsters, but they thought my dad owned the company, which is National Panasonic. Yeah, Panasonic is a Japanese massive company, so they thought he owned it. So they mailed him a bullet, basically saying, "Come on, help us out." And so that was 17, and then as a result of that whole situation, we relocated after it was resolved at the age of 18, moved to a new city, started university studies, got involved in the church plant, da. At 19, I don't think it was depression. Even now, I think, I wasn't diagnosed or anything, but I don't think it was depression. And I realize now that there are 10 types of depressions, okay? And it might have been that I had a type of a emotional dip, okay? So I don't know if it was clinical or not, but maybe it was situational depression. It's one of the 10 types. So kind of went through a dip and got really jaded, very negative, very critical, went to church, did the motions, but really had no passion, no enthusiasm. And I was still the ministry leader, youth ministry leader, but if everything was blue. Was it blue or gray? Maybe more gray. Gray. Everything looked gray. And I remember moping about, went to college, but I started to attend an adult small group. So I was 19, I started to attend a family small group, which was multi-generational with kids and families and young working adults. And I remember just going there, and it felt like a safe space. It felt like I didn't have to do anything. I could just be there. I could just be present. People were kind. I never said anything. Actually, I never told anyone. This might even be the first time I'm saying this publicly. But that group just treating me and loving me, and not like they knew something was wrong, but they just welcomed me, and we had fun. We talked about boy-girl relationship stuff and and that helped me tremendously to experience an environment of love in the midst of a lot of pressures of being a student in ministry and maybe carrying some of that emotional weight of what had happened to the family. So that's one thing that I remember clearly, how a small group, which I per se wasn't a leader of, really helped me. In my university years, or in my early young adult working years, I was then entrusted with a small group that became really interesting. We had we had a single mother with 4 children, of which 2 were highly autistic, young. Then the other end of the spectrum, we had this lady that had a learning, that had I don't know what's the right word to call it, so forgive me, I'm not politically correct. But she had an intellectual disability, right? And so she had the reasoning ability of maybe a 10, 12-year-old, but she was in her 60s. And then we had somebody in corporate finance. We had a non-believer who was pursuing this girl in corporate finance. We had a university guy who was a car junkie, and every conversation was about lower profile tires, about bigger air filters, and he wanted to chrome his car and his issues with his dad, and and then lowering this, lowering that, and suspensions, and so we had a guy like that. We had university students. We had this lady that came to the small group, but her husband was in adultery, and he stayed and wanted to stay in that adulterous relationship, right? We had a recovering missionary. This guy had gone to the Russian-speaking world. Huge issues with the missions agency, and the leader came back, and years after, still carrying that baggage, and he was in the group. We had expatriates, okay. Anyway, and so I was 20, kind of Yapi's age or younger. This was the group that I was responsible for, and I learned so much. I really learned so much. I learned many things, and so I think if we don't understand how actually being in a small group helps us more than we can help someone else, maybe we're on the wrong track. I think God wants to shape us first. There's a guy called Robert Clinton, not Bill Clinton, Robert Clinton, who wrote a book on leadership, and he said, you know what? His thesis is, his hypothesis is, before you turn 40 or 45, God works in you. After you're 45, God works through you. So perhaps for the most of us who are pre-45 here, myself included, perhaps that is what God is using to shape our faith. Perhaps you have some difficult people in your group and some wonderful people in your group, because God wants to shape you in and through that. So in what way is small group helping you today? I think that's an important question. We always think we're the ones that need to give help, when we don't realize God uses our group to shape us. Extremely formative, yeah? Okay, let me give you, go into groups of 3 people, all right? And just feed back to each other. Spend about 15 minutes, 10, 12 minutes doing this. And you can just rattle through the questions. You can start in any order. It doesn't have to be sequential. Good? Great, go for it.